Hi, I'm Tom and I go to Al-Anon. And I'm happy to share with you this evening. I thank you for the invitation to come all the way to the wilds of Provo and Salt Lake in Utah. I live in Oakland, California. And I have been here a couple of times. My middle brother and his wife did some doctoral work at BYU, and I visited them. And this is 25 or 30 years ago, and I was a hot mess. And I was not an easy person to be around. I know you'll find that shocking. But anyway, hurrah, I'm back and I have some friends here because of the program. Because of the program, I find I've got friends in lots of places. So what I'm going to do tonight is just share my stuff. If I say anything helpful, use it, and if it's not helpful, don't worry about it. And different groups have different rules. I've been to meetings in Texas where in Al-Anon they'll just say, if you're in another 12-step program, we don't want to hear about it. And I understand that because some of us who are alcoholics in recovery are sure you want to hear all about us. No, I understand that, but I want you to know I had to get sober first before I could go into Al-Anon. And alcoholic family, of course, not a bad alcoholic family. We were Eisenhower Republican alcoholics, and everyone held down jobs, and no one went to the emergency room very much. But there was a lot of stuff just not talked about, and a lot of things that were just avoided. One of the recovery stories in Al-Anon is how, like in alcoholic homes, rules get followed. And one of the three rules, you don't talk, you don't trust, and you don't feel. And that helps you survive as a kid, complicates adolescence, and ruins adult life. So part of Al-Anon recovery is learning how to talk about stuff without swearing, without blaming, without accusing, without hurling invective. Just learning how to talk about things. My sponsor, who is also from a family of heroic alcoholics, his name was Terry, and he was a priest of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, 9 years older than me, and he was giving a talk somewhere once in that vast Southern California landscape. And this old guy comes up and sees him and says, he used his family name, and said, "Are you from this family from Grass Valley?" And Terry said, "Yeah, those are my people." And the old guy said, "I knew your grandfather. He was the oldest of 6 boys. He was the only one that did not die of alcoholism. And he had one son, Terry's father, who died of alcoholism at the age of 46. So it's generational. It's like a rock in the pond, and there's ripples, and it just goes forever. So Terry said, this takes about 10 years. After 10 years of sharing at meetings, you find a way of telling your story without blaming anybody else, and without letting yourself off the hook. You just tell your story without editorial opinion. And it's kind of clean. And if you do it that way without the trauma and the drama, people can take what they need and leave the rest. Al-Anon's a funny program, though, and I've sure had trouble with it. I'm a Catholic priest, and I'm a high school teacher. And high school kids act exactly like alcoholics. I don't know if you know that. But if you're teaching high school kids, you're surrounded by alcoholics. I don't think I'm the only teacher here tonight, I'm pretty sure, and there might be a couple of nurses too. We spot you. At an Al-Anon meeting, but I was talking to a group of teachers, and one of the teachers taught 5th graders. And she said, actually, alcoholics are a lot like 5th graders. 5th graders are a lot like alcoholics. So with all the trauma and drama of adolescence, and it's a job I loved, I got all wrapped up in the trauma and the drama and the adrenaline. And for someone like me, that's drugs. I mean, that's as good as cocaine. A real emergency late at night, you know. Whew, let's go, let's do it again. Learning how to talk about things, learning how to have feelings, learning how to have emotions. For me, I'd rather read about it than feel it. I'd rather talk about it than feel it. I've read books on the subject. But having them is really different. It's like thinking you know how to swim if you've read a book about it. Oh, I understand. You move your arms and legs and kick, and you breathe out of the side of your head. That's what having emotions is really. Early in recovery, I started having the hot feelings and the cold feelings and the feelings that we're connected and the feelings that I hate you and the feelings that I have nothing to do with you and the feelings I want to move in with you. All those feelings. And I had no words for them. And someone at a meeting talked about being on an emotional roller coaster. And I need a picture. And that gave me an idea of what I was going on inside, although I was, teaching and having a job and a whole bunch of other things, but it was chaotic inside. I was born in 1947, Truman's first term. And Mickey Mouse Club was a big thing on 1950s, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I loved Mickey Mouse Club. And on Fridays they had Science Day, and I am not a scientist, but they tried to show us one Friday what a nuclear reaction looked like. And they had a room this big full of mouse traps, and each mouse trap was set, and on each mouse trap was 2 ping pong balls. And then they had a camera from this angle and that angle, and then they took 1 ping pong ball and they threw it into the room, and then 2 and then 4 and then 10,000, And I identified with that emotionally very, very much. That's a lot of how I would react to things. Whew, took a long time. As a high school teacher, chasing kids, arguing with kids, fighting with kids, worrying about kids, that's a real important part of pre-Al-Anon recovery. If you're not worried, you don't care. My mom believed if she worried right, her children would live. And if she didn't worry right, we were dead. And it was a lot of anxiety in the house. So I was on a weekend retreat with a group of people in recovery. And they had a joint meeting on Saturday night for the AAs and Al-Anons. And the AAs let the Al-Anons speak. They don't always. And I heard a guy talk. He was an older fellow. His wife was the alcoholic. And he simply said, in Al-Anon, I learned how to live with a crazy person and not go crazy myself. I needed to hear that because I felt crazy. I mean, high, low, high, this kind of thing. So I tried an Al-Anon meeting. Mostly women, downtown Los Angeles. We had 3 or 4 men, we all sat in the back. The woman who was secretary of the meeting had been secretary for several hundred years. And she knew everything. And the format of the meeting was to read stuff. Al-Anon loves reading stuff. You could come 20 minutes into the meeting and they're still reading. Lot to read. You don't want to miss anything, They'd read a lot of stuff, and then the real meeting began. And what would happen is women would raise their hand, secretary call on them. The called on person would present to her the problem, and the secretary would solve it. Now, in her defense, she was a smart lady. and she'd been around. Kind of a combination of Martha Stewart and Heloise, answers for everything, every imaginable problem. I almost expected to see two women coming up the row with a child saying, divide the child in half. thought. So what you need to know is that's not Al-Anon. That's North Korea. And one of the crazinesses for some of us who are in need of Al-Anon is we have answers for everybody, and we love being in control, and we can solve so many problems. If you just do what I tell you, we'll be fine. I can remember, I was 9 years old. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and my parents were not handling my oldest brother at all. He was exactly like my father, and so there was nothing but... I can remember at the age of 8 trying to explain to my mother how to handle my oldest brother better. That's not the job of an 8-year-old kid, But I liked being in emergencies and help me. It's just awful. So that meeting, there was no free air to breathe in that meeting, but they had a lot of answers. And I went to another meeting where traditions were observed. And it was a better meeting, and I had some explanation. A man was talking about his partner. She and he had been together for years, and she was a very abusive alcoholic. And he said, 26 days out of every month, it was a misery living with her. 26 days out of the month. But for 2 or 3 or 4 days, it was sensational. And he had 10 years of that. And someone sat him down and said, 3 does not equal 26. This is out of balance. If I'm just loyal enough, faithful enough, hardworking enough, cute enough, cook enough, clean enough, it'll be okay maybe next month. And that's a long way to live. A lot of untreated Al-Anon folks die years before they have to because they're worn out. I left teaching. I no longer liked kids, and that's when it's time to leave. I guess I was in my mid-30s, late 30s, and I spent all my time arguing with children. What an awful way to live. And I got a job offer, and I took it, moving back to Oakland, which is near Berkeley, near San Francisco. And I got involved in a lot of social work for the next couple of years. And it was way above my abilities in many ways, but I sure learned a lot of things. And I got back involved in Al-Anon. When I was about 10 years sober, it was time to start dealing with mom and dad. Because I didn't like them. So I got a cassette tape of a teacher from Texas, West Texas, Permian Basin High School. Her name was Blanche. And for 20 years, she was a major Al-Anon speaker. She married an alcoholic and had kids and stuff and so forth, and she can tell her own story. But she was able to explain Al-Anon to me. I mean, I knew I was exhausted and I was enraged. But I had no solution. I was going to the other program, but I had no solution for the exhaustion and the rage. And I'd go to Al-Anon, and it was like trying to grab smoke. These funny, ethereal, vague, almost mystical words and people smiling funny smiles, and I'm not getting it. Trying to grab smoke. So I listened to this cassette tape, and it's one of those cassette tapes I played over and over and over and over in my car. Blanche died in the year 2000 in a freak accident. But boy, she has impacted my life. Here's a couple things she said. In Al-Anon, we learn how to keep our sails out of other people's wind. There's a lot of wind blowing. And I used to love the excitement of it, and I used to love the drama of it. Hurricane, tornado, I no longer respond that way. I had to realize that so much of the blowing wind is none of my business. And I don't want to play. Getting older helps. And getting tired more quickly helps. But that image of keeping my sails out of other people's wind. She also said when she was growing up in northern Florida as a little girl, she was taught what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said that's not true. What I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. You need to know about the disease. I was leading a group in upstate New York. Women in Al-Anon, families and friends. And I gave talks like I do. I'm basically a high school teacher. I can give talks. And I was doing some one-on-one conversations, and a lady came in Saturday morning, and she said, if I had known you were an alcoholic, I never would have come. Now, I've been going to Al-Anon for a while. I mentioned last night in Salt Lake, each year of recovery gives you 1 more second of response time. The biggest difference between being 5 years in the program and 10 years in the program is 5 seconds of response time. So I did not say to this woman, what's wrong with you? I didn't say that because that's not helpful. I had a few seconds of recovery. You know, if I had known you, I would not. And I said, tell me about that. You know, act, don't react. Don't get defensive. Don't hit back. Tell me about that. And she said, my alcoholic husband ruined my life and the lives of my children. Okay, I said, how old are your kids? She said, they're now grown up. I said, okay. I thought that I was talking to someone who was new in Al-Anon. And then I said, so how long have you been coming to meetings? She said, 12 years. And I almost said, what? Have you heard nothing? See, but that's not helpful. And what I realize is she knows nothing about, all she's heard is pain. Whew. Well, I'm not going to fix her, I know that. I told her if she needed to leave and go back home, she sure has permission, but she's welcome to stay. But I was very clear about talking more about the disease because she had no information. All she had was misery. And learning it's a family disease, learning about allergy of the body and obsession of the mind. Ooh, I heard this. Alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. And because this is an honest program, I want you to know when I first heard that story, they didn't say dancing with the gorilla, they said dating the gorilla, and they didn't say dating. But you get a clear image of you are on the receiving end. And you're not done till the gorilla's done. And then the person went on to say, listen, if you're clean and sober today, it doesn't mean you're smarter than the gorilla or better than the gorilla. It means the gorilla let go. The gorilla's taking a little break. If you're clean and sober today, get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage even when the gorilla starts humming your song, which it does. Oh, I'll never go back. It was so disgusting. You know. And then it's the full moon, and you're a little edgy, and the gorilla looks cute in the moonlight, and maybe one more little dance, and you end up dead. One of my pals in Vegas said he doesn't want to dance with the gorilla, but every so often he wants to pet it just a little bit, Stay out of the cage. Now, we who love alcoholics, and they're cute, and they're fun. We who love alcoholics, we visit the zoo a lot. And you go through, and there are lions, and there's tigers and bears. And then you go by the gorilla cage, and you look in, and you see the person you love with the gorilla. Might be your mom or dad. That makes you crazy. Might be one of your brothers and sisters. Might be your spouse. Might be one of your kids or grandkids. The new group coming into Al-Anon are parents and grandparents. They had answers for everything, and they knew everything, and they quoted the book. And they were king and queen AA until their oldest granddaughter ended up in the emergency room from an overdose, and suddenly they know nothing. Newcomers in Al-Anon, we're so glad you're here, and we know you're scared to death. Whew. So we look in the gorilla cage, the person we love is there, and we need to do something. Something must be done. We have to take action. Solve this problem. So we get into the gorilla cage, and we start vacuuming, we start sweeping, we move the furniture around for the right feng shui. Do you have feng shui in Provo? You hang pictures of the Dalai Lama, some nice Chinese poetry. Nothing helps. Vegan meals, that doesn't help. So you get between the gorilla and the person you love when you try to pull them apart, and the gorilla turns on you and yanks your arms and legs off. The spiritual, emotional, and physical casualties done to those of us who love alcoholics and addicts is immense. So we have a program, and it's called Al-Anon. And a lot of the Al-Anon program, a lot of it, comes down to this. Stay out of the cage. Let's repeat that. Stay out of the cage. But I only want to vacuum a little. It doesn't help. We're going to meet over by the giraffes, and we're going to talk about our need to vacuum cages that we don't belong in. Huge difference. Whew. And I'll tell you, there are some gorillas that catch my eye. It still happens. Oh, I could have such a good time till I'm dead. But maybe I should just back off a little bit, or I bump into someone and I'm allergic to some people. I want to send them to the dentist, I want to pay their rent, and I want to get them through college. And they're 47. And they're not interested in any of those things, but they have a nice smile. Goodness gracious. Some of us in Al-Anon are great experts. We think we know everything. And some of us do. Some of us do. It's quite a burden. And I met a lady in Al-Anon, and she thought the literature was awful. And a lot of it is. Things written by committees can we make this more boring? Let's try it again. More boring, more boring. So this lady wrote her own literature. And she was confident and had answers. Like lady number one who ran the meeting, she had answers and solutions and looked very, very confident. And people want help and people want direction. And so people started at, be my sponsor, be my sponsor. And she'd give them the manuscript. How to handle this, how to handle that, what about this, what about that. It took about 5 or 10 years, but she started getting well. And the book got thinner and thinner. And she had less advice to offer to everybody about everything. And then she finally told me, now I tell the people I only have one piece of advice for people I sponsor. And I said, what's that? I said, I tell them, call before you shoot. Now, of course, the alcoholic gets confused there, wondering, who would you shoot? And they don't know that in the dark Al-Anon, the real conversation is, do you shoot to kill or do you shoot to maim? And the room frequently divides right in half. You know? The nice thing about maiming someone is every time they try to move, they'll think of you. And that's an intimacy you don't get frequently, you know? But the rage. I bumped into a woman from Arkansas and I heard her talk about almost killing her husband. It's hilarious, but it's her story. And I went back to Oakland. She talked about that which we don't talk about, namely anger and rage and violence. Because those are almost unspeakable. I get angry all the time. I also get afraid all the time. I have a full range of emotions at the age of 77 and long recovery. I mentioned at a meeting in Los Angeles that I get angry because I'm surrounded by fools. And one of the people there said, well, if you were really spiritual, you'd never get angry. Really? Took a few seconds, and then I said, that's very helpful. Which is sarcasm. You get to be angry, you get to be mad, you get to be sad, you get to be a real human being. You do not have to pretend everything's fine. Because sometimes the day is really long. Anyway, I get angry. I get afraid of stairs. I get afraid of falling. I get afraid of thoughts that jump into my head. I've learned in recovery that I don't have to keep secrets, and I don't. When I have some very unpleasant thoughts, I can share them with others right away. Oh, you shouldn't think that, but I do. You know? Knee, ankle. A little bit more on anger, maybe. Oh, anyway, I went back to Oakland. And I said, we need to have a workshop, the next AA, next Al-Anon thing, let's have a workshop just on murderous thoughts. People get panicky and run around. So we just labeled it Murderous Thoughts. And the room was full. And the person who ran it was very gentle and friendly and told the truth and gave permission for others to talk about things, you know. Some dark things that you can't really talk about outside of people in recovery. At the meeting I go to, we have a fellow, his family's impossible, including the children, and they're all teenagers. And his fantasy is just shoving people downstairs. Because it doesn't leave a mark. And it can be very efficient. And we explained to him, we don't push anyone down the stairs today. You can always push people down the stairs tomorrow. He said, I can live with that. So on his desk, he has tomorrow. And they think he likes Annie, but it's not. It's a little Al-Anon slogan. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I'll shove them tomorrow. It's not the thing. So the next year we had it again. But this time the title was, What Would You Do with the Body? By the way, I really love British murder mysteries where they always have to find the bodies. I mean, I'm right there. It matches a lot. I listen to those to go to sleep. It helps me. I finally asked my friend from Arkansas, I said, what were you going to do with the body? And she said, first things first, kill the son of a bitch. So Al-Anon gives me a place to go where I can talk about real things with people who can talk about real things with me. And there's faith and there's hope and there's charity in the rooms. But it takes a long time. Some of us come in very, very battered. The Al-Anon tradition that I like ever so much, and I refer to regularly, is the fifth tradition. And here it is. It says, each Al-Anon family group has but one purpose: to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of AA ourselves, by encouraging and understanding our alcoholic relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics. Practicing, encouraging, understanding, welcoming, giving comfort. And for some of us, it takes a long time. I was going to go to I've been to several of the Al-Anon conventions. The one in Vancouver 10 years ago, and Baltimore 5 years ago. Great conventions. Heard people talk. In Baltimore, a lady talked, and she was in those early Al-Anon days, and she said, in early Al-Anon, we really were cookie makers and coffee makers. We were told that was our job, and that our whole purpose was to stand by your man, and that was Al-Anon for a couple of years, until they realized how crazy they were. Much more so than the AAs. Impossible combinations of things that we get into. We who are married to them, or adult children of them, or the parents and grandparents of them, we can get tied in all kinds of knots. So I was going to go to Albuquerque. I had a plane ticket and a hotel. And I was going to go a couple days early to kind of get settled in. And I was going to fly out at 11 o'clock from San Francisco. I got a 7 a.m. notice from United Airlines that my plane had been canceled. And I could not fly out that day or the next day. I flapped, and I could get a plane on Saturday, but I just decided guess I'm not going to the convention this year. And I mentioned that to some people, and they said, well, I guess God didn't want you to go to the convention. And I said, I think you have God mixed up with United Airlines. 800 planes got canceled out of Denver that day, not just so Tom would not get to Albuquerque. See, that's a little grandiose. And I find on a regular basis, I need to ask God for help. Even little bits, just help. I'm an official God person. I'm clergy, and I should have all that stuff worked out, but I don't. And I have questions and problems and angers, and on a regular basis, I have to turn things over. The way I heard Step 3 talked about in Al-Anon was this. You show up, you pay attention, you tell the truth, and you let go of the results. The results are in God's good hands. And when I do that, things work out. Things work out. It doesn't mean I get my way, but things work out. It's the letting go. It's the turning it over. It's the asking for help. It's that process of showing up. And it works out. And I find that so helpful. I like the serenity prayer. And I think the first 10 or 20 years I heard it, I thought the serenity prayer was about me getting serenity. Oh God, calm me down. Oh God, make me serene. Oh God, help my side win. You know, those kinds of prayers. And I was in Texas, and I heard a fellow talk. I have no idea what his name was. He was well known. Near Lake Dallas at the Jesuit retreat house. He was doing some talks there. And in my memory, he's wearing a big cowboy hat, but that's probably because it was in Texas, right? And I have no idea. But so I listened to him talk. He had lots to say, and he mentioned the serenity prayer. Give us some serenity because we have decisions to make. Grown-ups make decisions. We say yes to things and no to things. It's what grown-ups do. Kids can't make any decisions. Things happen to them. And then he said, there are things I can change and there are things I cannot change. He said, here are 3 things I can change. Here are 3 things I cannot change. I cannot change the past. And I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. I'm not going to worry about the past. I'm not going to argue about the past. I'm not going to live in the past. I'm an amateur historian, so I read a lot about that stuff, and you can see where things go wrong. If you want to, one of the great Al-Anon questions, of course, is what could go wrong. That's always a good question. Barbara Tuchman writes a book called The Guns of August, which is on the first month of the First World War. What could go wrong? And the answer is everything. We'll all be home by Christmas. And they weren't, but you can find that out on your own. What could go wrong? I can't change the past. I can't change the truth. And, what's the truth? Let's start with Isaac Newton. The laws of physics. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, that's the law. I feel so high today, and so connected today, and so glorious today, and so confident today, and I'm sure this will never change. Opposite reaction. 3 days later, I want to hang myself. I hate you. The program doesn't work. There is no God. How could this happen? Well, you went way, 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 way up, and you're going to go way, 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 way down. It's the law. So no trauma, no drama. I want to live in that wide middle space. That's where I want to live. What goes up comes down. Electricity, the speed of light, digestion. The laws. I need to know what they are. And I can't change you. Loving someone does not change them, it changes me. Hating someone does not change them, it changes me. So I need to be very aware of that. I have tried to change people. When I was being a bad high school teacher, if I yelled enough at some kids, that will surely make a difference. Trying to fix my folks, let me manipulate them, connive, argue, shame. No. What can I change? I can change 3 things. I can change my thinking, and I can change my behavior, and I can change my attitudes. And that is the work of the program. Changing my thinking, getting some new ideas in there, especially after I knew everything. Getting some ideas in there. Changing my behavior. And even the littlest change in behavior will have consequences. One of the first things I started doing for self-care was using a seatbelt. This is before it became the law. But I heard a guy give a talk, and he gave a talk about on the West Coast there were 1,000 drunk driving fatalities one year. Not one drunken driver was wearing a seatbelt, not one. And I said to myself, this is something I could do. Seatbelt. And there were other things that it was time to change or let go of, and you probably have your own list. Changing behavior. In Narcotics Anonymous, they say, first thought wrong. And that applies to some of us in Al-Anon. I don't have to say the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm the youngest kid, and I was the clown. I could be a funny guy. Especially when things were tense, I'd be funny, and then that would break the tension. I carry that over into adulthood. And I find that if I'm in a situation like a meeting or a conference and it's really tense, I think of something hilarious to say. And I used to say it out loud. I don't do that anymore. I let the tension be tension. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to act out just because I'm feeling awkward. Even though some of this stuff is hilarious. It'll come up again. I've used humor as a weapon. I've attacked people with it. I've had lots of angry, nasty humor things that were hard on people. I've made fun of people. I've ridiculed people. And in part of my Al-Anon recovery, I don't do that one day at a time. It still can happen, but it really tastes bad. And I have to apologize and make amends right away. Behavior and attitudes. Not everything is a big deal. Not everything is about me. Not everything is, changing some attitudes. And these are things that take a long time. I come into Al-Anon, I'm a teacher, and I had students, and I had all these other things. And a lot of my friends are alcoholics, so there's lots of reasons to be an Al-Anon. But I come in because of my parents. My dad was alcoholic, and his father was alcoholic. And I have a picture on my desk of my father's grandfather in Ireland. And he was drinking himself, paralyzed and blind. So I had to redo some behavior and thinking. I had to stop blaming them. I had to stop making fun of them. One of the guys in my community, because I had a lot of stories about my parents, and a lot of them were mean. And one of the guys in my community said, you're really good with strangers, but you're terrible when you talk about your family. He said, I'm embarrassed for you when you talk about your... And I went, really? I just think I'm being insightful and clever. No, I was being a jerk. And I did some work, and I did some therapy. And that was very helpful, focusing on these things. And I got more into Al-Anon and adult children. So my dad lived to be an old man, 96 years old. No, 93, I guess. But prostate cancer took him out, and he was in the hospital and dying. And in his last days, I was able to go down and spend the nights with him. And then go home in the morning. And that was something I could do. I didn't have anything to say to him much. I mean, we hadn't talked in a long time. You could still have a conversation, but it was really hard work. Years and years and years of heavy drinking wore out a lot of his insides. So I didn't have to make nice or make him laugh. I just could sit with him. I remember massaging his hand. I remember massaging his feet. I remember when there was an emergency, I'd call the nurse. But I stayed there. And then my mom would come in the morning, and I'd visit with her a little bit. She's losing her partner of ever so many years. And some of us find that moms can be crazy making. I don't know if that's your experience. So he's been diagnosed as terminal. And I'm there late morning. They bring lunch. And it's some kind of protein thing maybe, and a soupy thing maybe, and something else, and some ice cream. And my mom's there, and he reaches out for the ice cream. He was still, he was up, but he reached out for the ice cream, and she said to him, "Soup first. We have soup first." I had a few seconds of response time. My first 5 thoughts were, at the top of my lungs, he's dying. Can't you let him have ice cream once before he dies? But I've been going to Al-Anon for a while, and this is none of my business. This is their deal. They worked this out somewhere during Roosevelt's second term. And what I did was simply say, "I'll be right back," which is another Al-Anon phrase that saves lives. And I went out into the hallway, and if I had a cigar, I would have eaten it. I was just, but it's not my wind. And he died, and I presided at the funeral, and I was able to do so respectfully, and we had someone say some words, and it was respectful and kind. And then Mom lived a while longer, and she's the untreated Al-Anon. Lots of worry, lots of upset, lots of anxiety, very hardworking lady, surrounded by alcoholics, 2 of her 3 sons. Her husband, her mother. So it's Christmas Eve, and she's in a senior independent living place, and there are lots of really old people there, and I've helped out a little bit. I've gone some Sundays to say Mass with people who want to attend, and it's Christmas Eve, and the Christmas Eve Mass, that midnight Mass that Christmas was like at 6 p.m., And I was going to go there with a couple people, and we're going to pray, and there's going to be a dozen or so really elderly people, and they don't come to me to communion. I bring them communion because they're not moving, and we've done this before, and it's going to be fine. So I called my mom that morning just to say, it's Christmas Eve, I'll see you tonight, we're going to be okay. What are you going to be wearing? We've been having this conversation since I was 7. And it makes me crazy. And I said, don't worry about that. We're going to have a good time. I'll see you. Don't embarrass me in front of my friend. She was afraid I'd show up looking like I do tonight. That was the fear. Without socks. I can't tell you how many decades we have thought about the sock issue, which is very controversial. So when she did that, I mean, suddenly, now this is on the phone, I was 11 years old and I was furious. And I just slammed the phone down. Okay, get out of the house, walk around, talk to a couple of people, let them know, but I calmed down, and when I got closer to 70, or 65 I guess I was at the time, I called her back, and knowing she was the hairdresser's, I can leave a message. And I just said, I'm sorry I hung up. I'll see you tonight. We'll have a good time. I did not have to explain to her the intricate dynamic of mother and son and socks that I'd spent several years discussing in therapy. I didn't have to talk with her about that because the craziness is mine, not hers. And I saw that night, and we got and went fine. And when she passed a few years later, I was able to preside respectfully and preach with great love. But it's hard to reach that when you're full of reactions. The Al-Anon phrase I find ever so helpful is act, don't react, act, don't react, act, don't react. Because I'm a reactor. I'm intuitive and I react before I know I'm reacting. Act, don't react. Live and let live. That means I get to have feelings and thoughts and actions and mistakes, and so does everybody else. Live and let live. And a lot of stuff is none of my business. None. Even if I'm related to them. None of my business. And I can keep my big fat mouth shut. Often, not always. Often, and when I do, it's good. Al-Anon influences the quality of my life, the quality of my relationships, the quality of my days. When I came into sobriety in 1976, the understanding was you were a member of one program or the other. There were a double winner was never said. But in the years since, we found out that lots of us need 2 or 3 programs for the quality of our lives. And I know some males so stuck in anger and resentment that they have no friends, but they're right all day long. And I always suggest to them 100,000 Al-Anon meetings as fast as possible. When I share at AA, I usually mention I'm an Al-Anon person, and I don't do an Al-Anon story, but I'll tell them I joined Al-Anon because I didn't want to be a sober person who was shooting people. So. And then anger and exhaustion, almost done. And anyway, at one meeting is in Marin County, which I almost never go to, Marin County. This lady came up to me afterwards, and she said, you know, I'm 7 years sober, and I hate everybody. Should I start going to Al-Anon? And my response to her was, hold out as long as you can. You know? Don't rush to get well too fast because you'll be unhappy. But when you're really desperate, we'll be glad to see you and you'll be glad to see us. Come on in. And it's going to take a while to find out we're not just grabbing smoke, but we have a way of proceeding and a focus, and we have a way of living that helps us do that which is possible. I talked to my sponsor once about what is God's will, you know, one of those great big topics. And he suggested when I'm looking for answers or a conundrum or God's will, he said, it is God's will for each of us to have a life. Go get one. And how do you make decisions? The 3 questions. I ask what's practical, and what's possible, and what's simple. And that's the direction I want to go in when I make decisions. If something's impossible, you don't have to do it. I'll repeat that because this is Al-Anon. If something's impossible, you don't have to do it. Some of us, we listen to Man of La Mancha for too long, and we the impossible dream to fight the unbeatable. That's not life. That's crazy. What's practical, what's possible, what's simple, and what helps us come to life. Happy Saturday night, Provo, Utah.